to a conclusive decision on a unanimous decision. But this one, they were unanimous, not guilty. The jury deliberating for more than 24 hours across 5 days before finally reaching this verdict. Daniel Penny found not guilty on all counts. On Friday, the judge overseeing dismissed the more severe charge of second-degree manslaughter, which carried a 15-year maximum sentence after the jury was unable to reach that unanimous verdict on that count. Now, a jury of 12 New Yorkers been locked down in that courtroom, like we said, for 5 days. It was 24 hours of deliberations trying to get to that first count. Once the judge dismissed that first count, they went to the second count, and that's when they finally got this decision where he was found not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. And that was shortly after they started deliberating this morning. They came in just after 10 a.m. this morning. They were inside for a little over an hour. There was some back and forth between the defense and the judge. When the defense came out, they came up to the judge and said, there's been protesters. And with so many windows open in the courtroom, we're told from our reporter, Michelle Ross, who's been inside, that there are so many windows open in that courtroom because of how hot it is in that building, that they could hear the protesters potentially from down in the street. The judge argued, well, there was protests on both sides. You had Jordan Neely protesters and you had Daniel Penny protesters. So both of them have been at each other. The defense was arguing that the Neely protesters were louder and the jury could potentially hear that, and that's why they would need to possibly switch rooms. That didn't get to that point because the jury found him not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. You know, at the request of prosecutors on Friday, the judge dismissed that second-degree manslaughter count. That was the big one. That carried a maximum of 15 years. This second count carried 4 years. There was no minimum in either of these counts. This directed the jury to turn to that lesser charge. What that means is now you're free to consider count 2. Now, whether or not that makes any difference or not, we'll see. But what we're going to do is wait for Michelle Ross because she's coming here. Prosecutors allege that Penny killed Neely. We'll go back to what this case is. A 30-year-old homeless man who had previously been a Michael Jackson impersonator when he placed him in a 6-minute-long chokehold on a subway car last year, including for 51 seconds after his body went limp. Now, assistant district attorneys have argued that Penny knew his actions could kill Neely, but continued to hold him in a chokehold for what they said was way too long, and they did not recognize his humanity. The medical examiner concluded that the chokehold did kill Neely. The defense arguing that Neely died from a genetic condition, they say, and that the synthetic marijuana found in his system. The jury saying they did not believe that. The defense attorney telling jurors that Penny acted to save subway passengers from a violent and desperate, that's a quote here, Neely, who was acting erratically and, quote, scared the living daylights out of everybody. But they were arguing that Neely was fighting back, and Penny continued to hold on because he feared he could break free, but he did not intend to kill Neely. We're waiting now for Michelle Ross to come out. The reporters are being forced to leave the courtroom. Right now we have a bunch of protesters who are yelling at us, pro-Neely protesters, as we report to you this afternoon, telling us to report something different than what was said inside that courtroom today. We're going to send it back to you, Bianca, just to ensure that they don't come through the barricades here.
Yeah, obviously we can tell that this is a high-stress situation as millions of people have been watching this and watching the outcome of this. As you heard Richard Giacobbe say there, Daniel Penny not guilty in the Jordan Neely subway chokehold death. We've been waiting for Michelle Ross, who's been covering this nonstop. We are waiting to speak to a couple legal experts as well, just to break down what this means, what it meant on Friday, what it means today, as there's going to be some fallout from this following the not guilty verdict. Michelle Ross, again, was inside that courtroom when that verdict was read, and she has been at that courthouse over the past couple of days in Lower Manhattan following this. So again, we're going to be going back over this as the jury finds Daniel Penny not guilty in this NYC chokehold subway death. As you can tell, a lot of people outside of that courthouse upset, visibly angered, as you can hear the yelling and whatnot behind Richard Giacobbe. It's been an issue as many people were wondering what was going to be the outcome of this case. We have a couple of people on standby as we have our team ready to speak more about this and give you a bit more insight on this. We have Lisa Lisa in our newsroom right now, Lisa Evers, who has been covering this nonstop as well. Lisa, as you heard, a lot of people on Daniel Penny's side, a lot of people against this, and you can see visibly upset. You can hear those audible yells for him, against him. But what is your take on this as we have been waiting for the outcome from this trial?
Well, Bianca, it was very clear even from the very beginning of this case at jury selection when I was down there at 100 Center Street at Manhattan Criminal Court that there's few cases that have polarized people as much as this one in recent years. And all of the issues that were touched on here are issues that New Yorkers and subway riders in particular are dealing with almost on a daily basis. That threat of feeling like somebody is intimidating you on the train. 1 minute they're panhandling, the next minute they could be attacking you. That threat of danger that people have, the mental illness crisis that has affected our city, where you have people who are homeless, mentally ill, as Jordan Neely apparently was, out there on the streets committing some crimes, others, and then those crimes escalating as law enforcement sources told us over the years. So there's that issue. There's the issue of the lack of resources. There's some people who say the system in New York City failed Jordan Neely. He should have gotten mental health treatment as well as been behind bars if he was a danger to the public. And then again, you had the other people looking at Daniel Penny as he was somebody who was trying to come to the aid of people who quite clearly, from the testimony that was given in court, the video shown by the defense team, many people felt threatened by Jordan Neely on that train. There was a woman that broke down in tears as she was testifying what she was going through, trembling. Then there was also conflicting medical testimony that Michelle can address later on that was presented in the courtroom. They challenged the medical examiners, Daniel Penny's team challenged the city medical examiner's report and conclusion that it was the chokehold that actually killed Neely. And they raised enough doubt, apparently, talking about the amount of drugs that was in his system, the K2, the other substances that were there. There was also testimony that was very surprising to me, one of the days that I was there inside the courtroom, where the EMTs testified that this is after the police got there, and Daniel Penny is just standing around looking like, who's going to tell me what to do or what can I do once the police arrive there on the scene. EMTs did not respond to that subway car to that platform area until more than 20 minutes after a 911 call was made to them. So there was that huge lapse of time. There were questions about when exactly he did die. Was he still alive at a certain point, even after that 6 minutes? So there was a lot of doubt that was raised, but the emotions, the intensity has been evident throughout the trial. And some days, a lot of protesters out there, a lot of people speaking out on social media in support of Daniel Penny. But clearly, emotions very, very intense right now. And Bianca, that's the latest. Back to you.
All right, Lisa, thank you for breaking that down for us. We're going to turn things back over to Richard Giacobas, who is outside of the courthouse there. Richard, I understand that you are chatting with a retired judge there. What is his take on this not guilty verdict right now?
So, Bianca, we're here with retired Judge George Grasso, who has, and also former NYPD, you were telling me. You were inside.
First Deputy Police Commissioner.
So you were inside the courtroom when that verdict came down. Can you tell me exactly what that was like?
It was high drama. The courtroom basically exploded. People screaming in anger and people screaming just as loud in jubilation. I never quite saw anything like it in my time as a judge, or even in my time in the police department.
Was it just an eruption of?
It was an eruption of emotion, for and against.
Yeah. So describe that moment to me, because for as long as you've been a judge, for you to say this is the most emotion you've ever seen
in the courtroom, spontaneously, in the moment of the verdict, I think it certainly caught me by surprise, because since it was a hung jury on the more serious manslaughter charge on Friday, it seemed to me that what happened today would either be a hung jury on criminally negligent homicide, or if there was going to be a unanimous jury, that it would be unanimous for guilty, just because of the logic.
Yeah.
But I guess jurors must have searched their consciences over the weekend and gave this some really hard thought. I frankly think they made the right decision. I think it was a travesty of justice that this case was brought to trial to begin with. I know there are people, we've got loud protesters next to me, but Mr. Penny was a good actor by every account. He was a good Samaritan. He put his life on the line to defend others, and it's a tragedy what happened to Mr. Neely.
I don't think we're. Are you on us right now? Okay, so I want to continue on, Judge, just for 1 second. When you go back to that first count that was dismissed by the judge on Friday, when you heard that, were you saying that you were going to, did you proceed to look at this and say, well, maybe the jury wouldn't be able to come to a unanimous guilty verdict with this count too, that they would actually go the way that they went?
Like a hung jury on count two. Yes.
You did?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought it was either going to be that, or maybe they would come in guilty on count two, because it was hard for me to wrap my head around any juror who originally was thinking the defendant was guilty on the more serious would turn around and acquit on the less serious. But this is a tricky case. It's a tricky case. It's a case where both sides agreed that Mr. Penny was a good man.
Yeah, I can't believe you out here laughing and shit. You out here laughing and shit.
To try to put his life on the line to protect people. And therefore, the idea that this case was brought to begin with, I think, is a travesty of justice, playing into the crowd like the kind of people we hear in the background. That isn't the way the criminal justice system should work, and I give the jury tremendous credit for their courage.
And Judge, that was brought up today in the courtroom, these protesters, more on the side of the pro-Jordan Neely protesters. The defense came up to the judge. Talk about that exchange. We heard it was a heated exchange to quiet down these protesters because of all the windows that are open in the courtroom. We didn't realize how many windows were actually open.
The defense was rightly concerned that, hearing these kinds of protesters, apparently saying some horrible things about Mr. Penny.
All right, we're going to check back in with our team there down at the courthouse. But right now, we're going to check in with Imran Ansari, who has a very gifted legal mind following this issue, as you can see, contested in your hearing there outside the courthouse. Imran, I want to ask you a couple questions, though, because as you heard Judge Grasso talk about the fact that they said no to manslaughter, but now we're also saying no to criminally negligent homicide. There was a hung jury on Friday. What happened in the span of a couple days to make them all say we're going to decide on a not guilty verdict?
Yeah, I think it was an interesting move first. Let's take the first step by the prosecution, moving to dismiss that manslaughter charge. That, of course, paved the way for the prosecution to keep proceeding with the case without a hung jury. And now the jury, with sort of swift justice this morning, coming back with the acquittal on criminally negligent homicide. I think that they were clearly hung on the manslaughter charge. And if that manslaughter charge was going to be hung, this count, the criminally negligent homicide count that he was just acquitted on, would be the sticking point for that jury, or they would come to a consensus, and they came to a consensus here with an acquittal. This case, you hear it outside the courthouse there, and you probably heard it within that deliberation room. That was a divided jury, at least on that top count. But when they sat down this morning, they considered the charge and the law as to criminally negligent homicide. Clearly, they were able to have a meeting of the minds and come back with this unanimous decision. Of course, I think this is not the end of us hearing about this case, because it's divided the city in many ways, and it's going to be interesting to see how we move forward with all the issues that this case raised: mental health awareness, the city's ability to treat people who are homeless and suffering from mental health, and also the crime in the city and the things that we face every day day as New Yorkers when we ride the subway and we are encountering people on the subway who may be sick, who may be having some issues, but of course the crime. And we had a horrible stabbing from someone who was suffering from mental health illness with innocent lives lost. And I think it's going to be something we're going to be focusing on here as New Yorkers, even after this case.
DA, we take back a look at what the jurors asked for, which was the city medical examiner's testimony. So you reread to them to talk about the fact that part of her testimony included issuing a death certificate without getting a toxicology test result. Was that maybe a tipping point in them concluding this is going to be a not guilty verdict?
Well, I think they were focusing this morning on the language of that charge, right? Was Daniel Penny acting in a reasonable way, and did his conduct arise to criminal negligence? And I think the Emmy report did potentially have a factor in this. But I think with this charge in particular, it was more so the conduct of Daniel Penny,
Imran,
whether it arose to criminal negligence or not.
I'm sorry to interrupt you right now. We're going to turn things back over here at the courthouse as we're taking a live presser. We're checking in what they have to say.
Choked to death by someone who didn't care people was telling him to stop. Last week, the jury they couldn't decide on the top charge, but they come back this week and they give up on us. The family's hurt. I promised this family that we would get justice. We're still going to do that. We're going to move forward with our suit. The district attorney did a good job, but the jury in this case let us down. So now here's what we have. We have a call to action, because you have to do something with this anger and with this rage. Our call to action is to take care of each other. We can't rely on outside people. If we see someone asking for food, we have to take the responsibility to give it to them. If we see someone cold, to give them a coat. If we see someone going through something, to ask them if they're okay. That's how we help each other, because we can't rely on the system to do it for us. And clearly, if we get to this point, it's too late. We have to be there for each other, and that's our call to action. Everybody that's pissed off at this verdict, I challenge you to go outside today and help one person. That's my challenge. If you're angry, if you're hurt, go help one person. That's how we beat the system. That's how we turn this around, by being there for each other.
Right on.
I just want to say, I miss my son. My son didn't have to go through this. I didn't have to go through this either. It hurts. It really, really hurts. What are we going to do, people? What's going to happen to us now? I had enough of this. The system is rigged. Come on, people. Let's do something about this.
Let's do something about it. Too often, we have Eric Garner's mother here. There's too often this is happening where we're left alone in this society. We got to stop that. We have to change how we impact each other. Jordan came on that subway car. The first thing he asked for was food, and he was killed. And the person who killed him was not held responsible. We cannot allow this to keep happening.
I got you. Oh. Look like the police are attacking protesters.
Good morning, everyone. Here we stand once again in front of this unjust system. I stood here 10 years ago because they did not give justice to my son with the chokehold. I fought hard to get the anti-chokehold bill passed, which did pass. But it shouldn't only be for police officers, it should be for civilians also. No one deserves to be choked to death. And you know, we're in that courtroom and people are cheering for the verdict. They made the loudest noise. The judge did nothing. But when his father spoke out, they put him out the courtroom. Is that justice? Or what? We can't allow this to keep going on. We have to fight this system. That's what I had to do. I had to fight to get the little justice that I got. I got one police officer fired. There's more that need to be fired. But I tell this family, do not give up. Because that's what they want you to do. They want to discourage you. Just like they tried to discourage me. But 10 years later, I'm still fighting. And I'm not only fighting for myself, I'm fighting for families like yourself. That's why I have to come out when this injustice is done. If this had been the other way, if your family had murdered this so-called innocent guy now, it would have been a different story. He would have been in jail or would have never came out. But they don't do the same to us. It's two justice systems.
You know that.
And we have to stop this. And the only way that we can stop it is to stand together. Those of us who are against what happened, we have to speak up. We can't treat this just like another news story, not another press conference. We have to speak up, and stand up. So I just say today, we did not get justice once again. And I am saddened. I am truly saddened by this situation because it keeps on happening and no one is standing accountable for their actions. So that means that any civilian could get on the train if they feel threatened and they could choke someone out and they're going to get found not guilty, just like today. This sets a precedent. And we can't let this happen. If the police can't do it, the civilians can't do it either. And I just want you to stand with this family. This family needs you right now.
Right on. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry.
All right, we just heard the Daniel Penny acquitted in subway chokehold death of homeless man. The press conference there, you heard his father speak a bit and Eric Garner's mother speak a bit. But we're going to turn things over to Michelle Ross, who is in front of the courthouse right now. Michelle has been covering this for the past couple of days, nonstop. Michelle, your first thoughts on the jury coming back with an acquittal?
Well, my first thought, Bianca, was to look at Daniel Penny's reaction because he has been expressionless throughout this entire trial. And he, for the first time, showed some emotion. He smiled big and he high-fived. He gave a handshake to his attorneys. Right after that, there were some issues happening inside the courtroom. Jordan Neely's father threw out some expletives and then he was kicked out of the courtroom. Shortly after that, some activists, Hawk Newsom and his sister also, they began yelling. And that's when everyone eventually was kicked out. But this was a story that captivated the country. It lit a new flame in social activists and also brought renewed attention to the everyday issues that New Yorkers face on the subway, and that's mental health coupled with crime. So the jury had to deal with, what was Daniel Penny? They had to figure out, was he this protective hero or was he a vigilante, someone who took it too far? And after the first count was dismissed, they decided today that he was not guilty on criminally negligent homicide. Bianca?
Michelle, that's important to point out because we did hear Eric Garner's mother saying that this was unjust, that the father spoke out, was kicked out, but activists were allowed to cheer. So what was your take on that? Was that factually accurate, or was there something else that you witnessed?
Sorry, Bianca, I lost you for a moment. Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, just in terms of what you experienced inside the courtroom, as we heard Eric Garner's mother say that this was unjust, in terms of Jordan Neely's father being kicked out for saying something, but activists were allowed to cheer and yell. Was that what you saw?
Sure.
Yeah, I know that we may have some audio issues as it's quite loud there right now, but as you, again, once have heard, we have been waiting 4 weeks for this trial to come to an end, and that end was an acquittal from Daniel Penny in terms of not being convicted on that first count and the second count. Right now, we're going to turn things back over to former district attorney, Brooklyn district attorney Imran Ansari, who has been covering this. Imran, want to get your take on some of the things that we just heard Jordan's father speak about and Eric Garner's mother speak about, who experienced a similar situation, saying that this was rigged, that it was unjust. However, for the prosecution, they needed to demonstrate that Neely's chokehold was the cause of Neely's, that Jordan's chokehold was the cause of Neely's death. Where did they fail in that?
Well, I think that the prosecution clearly didn't prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt as to the top count, the manslaughter charge that was dismissed. So that was left. The jury was left with the criminally negligent homicide case. And yeah, they had to show the causation as one factor, that chokehold was the actual proximate cause, the cause of Jordan Neely's death. Defense went on a different track with that, and they were arguing that there were other factors involved that led to the death, not necessarily the chokehold that the prosecution was going on. But also with this charge, the criminally negligent homicide charge, they had to find that the actions by Daniel Penny were unreasonable. They were not justified. So that justification, self-defense or defense of others, affirmative defense by the defense that was given to the jury was also a factor here. So what we are seeing is a lesser charge. They had to find that he was negligent and criminally negligent. They had to find that the chokehold was the actual cause of death. And they also had to find that he wasn't justified in doing so. So it was a tragic loss of life. And I feel for the family of Jordan Neely. And, you know, no life that is lost like this is something to be celebrated. But the jury spoke. That's what we see here. The jury had the case. They deliberated. They were hung on the top count, and they rendered their verdict. And of course, you know, the sympathy goes to Jordan Neely's family, but we saw the justice system play out here. And whenever there is a verdict in a case like this, where the city is divided, and you saw that the jury was even divided, but they came together on this count, it's going to cause that raw emotion. But as I was saying earlier, I think this case is really going to have us as New Yorkers focus in on the issues that we deal with every day as we commute around the city, and as we see people who need help, need mental health treatment, and may not be getting that through the infrastructure that we have here. Yeah. So there's the legal aspects, but the larger societal aspects that we see from this case.
Yeah, absolutely. We see those issues day in and day out here as New Yorkers. I know I asked you this before, but maybe you could explain again for people just tuning in to this verdict right now. We talked about the jurors saying we're not going to take manslaughter. We're going to be hung on that issue. But coming back to this, that second count, that criminally negligent homicide, what was it that changed for some of these jurors that possibly said maybe guilty on manslaughter, but we're going to say no for count two?
Yeah, we don't know the makeup of the jury in terms of who who can decide, or we're going for acquittal or for guilt on the manslaughter count. There could have been more people leaning towards guilt. There could have been more people leaning towards an acquittal. But I think we can discern or infer from the verdict, and a pretty quick verdict on the criminally negligent homicide charge this morning, that there was probably a majority that were going for acquittal at this time, because you didn't have a long deliberation on this count. You clearly saw the jury come together in some sort of consensus pretty early on this Monday morning. And of course, they're not deliberating over the weekends, but of course, they are thinking through it and internalizing it because they're human beings, right? So sure. Over the weekend, there was a thought process. And when this jury came together this Monday morning, they were able to come to that verdict on this count, which of course was a negligence count, right? It was taking negligence to a criminal level, and they found that the actions of Daniel Penny clearly did not rise to that level, or the prosecution just didn't prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt as to that count.
Imran, we're going to turn things over to Michelle Ross, who's outside the courthouse, and she's been inside the courthouse as this verdict came down. Michelle, obviously you see emotions on both sides of the aisle here. We're talking about the reaction from the people you saw in the courtroom. What was that?
You know, actually on both sides, we saw the claps, erupting, people cheering inside. They were immediately told to be quiet from the court officers. And right after that, a woman was crying uncontrollably. It almost sounded like she was going to throw up. And once she got into the hallway, that's when she almost passed out, according to our PA that was outside there. Now, when it comes to what followed after that, here outside of the courthouse, there were protests happening. There was a scuffle that just took place. We heard these chants happening inside of the courtroom, and that was a concern for the defense. They wanted to call a mistrial, scared that the jury would be influenced by that. So I'm going to bring in Judge Grasso. Judge, you were inside the courtroom. What did you think of the claps that erupted? You said that it was on both sides as well. You never saw that before.
No, not on both sides like that. I think it's frankly based upon emotions that were unleashed based on a case that should have never been brought in the first place. The criminal justice system in this case failed Jordan Neely, and they also failed Daniel Penny. And we can't have mob justice, and we can't have district attorneys capitulating to what the mob is saying and not doing what's objectively right. In this case, we ended up with a jury who had the courage to do what was objectively right, and I applaud them. But if the DA had been doing the right thing and enforcing the laws and enforcing the police when they enforce fare evasion and things of that nature, Mr. Neely, with his felony warrant, who had basically been living on the subway for almost 2 months prior to this incident, he would have been arrested, the warrant would have popped, he'd be in jail, but he'd be alive, and Mr. Penny would have never had to deal with what he had to deal with. Thank God for the jury system.
And we heard from Neely's family and his supporters. They just spoke. No word yet on if we have seen or heard Penny and his defense team, but we'll keep an eye on that and let you know what comes out of that. Bianca?
All right, Michelle, thank you so much. Before you go, Michelle, maybe we could ask you a couple questions, though, as you were there covering this the past couple of days. What was the reaction like outside the courtroom leading up to this come Friday when they said no to manslaughter? They dismissed that, and the judge dismissed that charge. What was that like then? Because was that leaning more towards they were going to say possibly no on this criminally negligent homicide charge, the second charge?
So everyone thought that once they dismissed the first count, that would be a guilty verdict, and it's something a guilty verdict on the second count, and that's something that the defense was worried about. But that's why the judge brought the jury out today again, and in a neutral way told them that this shouldn't influence the first count being dismissed shouldn't influence how you feel. It shouldn't influence your outside opinions that you hear. And a big concern also was the chanting outside. Is that going to influence their decision as well? But we also don't know how many people were in favor of Penny, in favor of Neely on the first count, so we didn't know which way this was going to swing. No one knows what happens inside of that jury room. No one knows what those conversations are like. But they came out quickly. I thought it was going to be later today that they would have to come down with a decision because they've been so diligent throughout this entire process. They've kept asking for more definitions. They didn't ask for any definitions for the second count, but that's when they were able to come out soon after. They were given those instructions about an hour after, and they came down with a not guilty verdict.
Interesting. All right, Michelle, we're going to turn things over to Richard Giacobas, who is also there on scene as this verdict came down. Richard, we have heard from Jordan's father. We have heard from Eric Garner's mother, who, again, as we said earlier, experienced something similar. And I can see that you have now moved somewhere where it's a bit quieter because you were right in the thick of it, where people were exploding in terms of their emotions, of the reaction to this verdict. What were you mostly seeing outside the courthouse, again, as we heard just loud noises from both, I'm sure, both sides of the aisle?
Both sides, but more, Bianca, of the pro-Jordan Neely protesters. We were right outside the courthouse as soon as the verdict came down, and as soon as we saw it come through and news got out to the pro-Jordan Neely protesters who were standing right near us. We had to move before because they almost got through the barricades where the press is standing. That's why we're over here now. But as soon as that verdict came down, they erupted. And they erupted trying to intimidate whoever was around them reporting this news, and that includes us. You have to understand, this is a very emotional case, one that's been since it happened back in May of 2023, and now to this point, they've been waiting out here day after day. This group probably about a dozen or so. It was larger this morning when the jurors were going in and when Daniel Penny was arriving here. But as the day got on, it got later into the morning, it kind of fizzled out. But they came with megaphones, they came with signs, and they wanted to make sure they proved the point that they were here. So whatever that verdict was going to be, they were going to be loud about it, and they were going to let us know and let the world know how they feel. Yes, it's emotional for them. They've been calling Daniel Penny a killer for months now. And for them to hear this news, it's still unsettling, and there is so much emotion that they want to break through those barricades. They want to get to wherever they can get to try to make their voices heard. So that's kind of what we were dealing with, what these protesters are dealing with. They're back in the front of the courthouse, and we're about a block away from them, and we still overhear them at this hour. You may have heard it in Michelle's shot there. You still hear those loud voices and that eruption of just anger and frustration that after all this time, they really thought, again, they were frustrated when count one was dismissed, so imagine getting a not guilty verdict all around.
Absolutely. Something interesting that I think it was Eric Garner's mother pointed out, and you are on the scene there talking to people day in and day out regarding this. And as a New Yorker, she mentioned that any civilian could get on a train, put someone in a chokehold, and effectively kill them and then not be found guilty for murder. But what is the sense now in New York after this happens, and we are still dealing with this really high increase of mental health issues?
Yes, well, I think it's mixed, Bianca. And to be honest, even being out here this morning, people seeing all the news media here, including us, we have a mix of people coming up to us. Right before we came on the air, I had a woman come up to me and say she's afraid to get on the train and has been afraid to get on the subway train ever since this case happened. It's always in the back of her mind. But then we have other people over the course of the last week who were telling us that this was justified, that Daniel Penny did the job to protect New Yorkers. There should be more people like Daniel Penny. And then there's other people who say Jordan Neely, this was unjust, that this could have been handled differently, and that they worry that there could be more people out there like this, and this could happen to someone else who needs mental illness help that Jordan Neely obviously did not get.
Absolutely, and as is the situation for so many people here in New York. Richard, thank you for the info on that. We're going to be covering this case all throughout the noon and throughout the rest of the day. We'll check back in with you a little bit later.
Thanks, Bianca.
All right, to some more following breaking news now on the CEO shooter manhunt. Now, sources say a man has been taken in for questioning in Altoona, Pennsylvania. He was said to be carrying a gun similar to the one used in that shooting. This comes as NYPD divers back in Central Park today. They're searching the lake near the Bethesda Fountain for a second day in a row. The suspect's backpack was found inside of that park, and the last official sighting of the suspect was on December 4th, the day of the killing, near the George Washington Bridge and the bus terminal, where he is believed to have left the city. And more of our breaking news coverage coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are continuing to follow breaking news in the verdict of Daniel Penny. Not too long ago, we heard Jordan Neely's family speak right outside the courthouse. We're going to turn things over to Michelle Ross, who has been covering this the past couple of days. Michelle, obviously a very, very big upset for Jordan Neely's family, as we heard his father say. What were some key takeaways?
Right, and this has been an emotionally charged trial on both sides. His father has been in the courtroom almost every day. His uncle has been in the courtroom every single day. They just spoke across the street to address the press, and they've now moved over here to address the protesters, thanking them for their support. Now, throughout this trial, Jordan Neely's uncle, Chris Neely, has said that his mental health issues started to begin once his mother died at the hands of his stepbrother. So they tried to, resonate, help the public understand, or help their protesters understand the reason for that. So they're addressing their supporters now, and they also spoke earlier. Here's what they said.
I just want to say I miss my son. My son didn't have to go through this. I didn't have to go through this either. It hurts. It really, really hurts. What are we going to do, people? What's going to happen to us now? I had enough of this. The system is rigged.
We're devastated, upset, angry, hurt. Over and over again, we keep coming to the system, asking the system to let us know that our lives have value. Jordan Neely was choked to death by someone who didn't care people was telling him to stop. Last week, the jury they couldn't decide on the top charge, but they come back this week and they give up on us. The family's hurt. I promised this family that we would get justice. We're still going to do that. We're going to move forward with our suit. The district attorney did a good job, but the jury in this case let us down.
And now his family has filed a civil lawsuit. We'll hear more about that later. Back to you, Bianca.
Right, Michelle, thank you for the update on that. And for the very latest on this verdict and other news, you can stay up to date on the Fox Local app right on your phone. You'll be able to watch all of our live newscasts and breaking news from anywhere that you are. Just scan the QR code to download the free Fox Local app to your phone right now. We still got more news straight ahead. Stay with us. Thanks for joining us on this Monday. Taking a live look outside right now. Not as cold today, but we're hearing some rain is returning. So let's turn things over to Audrey Puente for a first look at the forecast. Audrey, that wet weather here to stay for a few days, I'm hearing.
Well, we're actually going to get a break later this afternoon, Bianca, but we are going to stay unsettled for the next few days. It won't be raining consistently, but you will need your umbrella handy from time to time. We are expecting rain to stick with us right through the early afternoon, so have your umbrella handy if you're stepping out at this lunchtime hour. Temperatures will be above average as we go into the next couple of days. Another round of rain will come into play here on Wednesday, and it will also be a heavy rain and a wind-swept rain across the region. And then that winter chill will be back just in time for the end of the week here. So right now we're pretty mild. We're at 52 degrees right now out in Islip. Same number in East Hampton. It's 50 degrees exactly in Central Park. A little bit cooler off to the northwest here. We have readings in the 40s in Poughkeepsie and Sussex. It's 37 in Monticello. We do have breezy conditions right now. The wind is coming in off the water. That's keeping things a little bit damp across the region, but we also have some rain that is now pushed into the region here. It's light rainfall coming in across parts of the city and into Long Island, but off to the west, we can see steadier rainfall now pushing into western portions of New Jersey, as well as up towards the Hudson Valley. Now, keep in mind, temperatures are well above the freezing mark, so we are going to see the precipitation in the form of rain across the region. So we'll see that steady rainfall last throughout the rest of the afternoon, probably exiting the region just in time for the evening commute, so that'll be good for any planning that you have here. And then we have another system that'll be coming in our direction here. That's a low coming out of Texas that will tap into more Gulf moisture. That low will actually intensify offshore, and that will give us our next chance of precipitation as we go into Wednesday. So here on the Futurecast, we're looking at the first round that's coming through right now. Again, the rain will exit to the region here into the northeast, or rather into New England, roughly about 5 or 6 o'clock. So the afternoon commute should fare pretty good here. We'll have lots of clouds still in place, but we should stay dry for the rest of the evening here. And there will be some patchy fog developing, so be aware of that if you'll be driving around, because it could hinder your visibility in many spots. Now on Tuesday, the clouds remain. We'll have a couple of rounds of showers coming in as we go into the evening, but it's really as we go into Wednesday when we'll see some enhanced rainfall coming in from the south here, and that rain will be heavy at times. We have an area of low pressure that's going to intensify right here over the northeast, and on the back side of it, you can see some snow developing here. That's because it's going to pull in some very cold air from Canada, and that colder air will be in place for us as we go into the end of the week. So with this first round of rainfall coming in right now, it's going to be less than a half an inch before it's all said and done. But on Wednesday, different story. Check out some of these amounts here. With that heavy rain coming through, we could see upwards of 2, possibly 3 inches before it's all said and done. So for today, have your umbrella handy at least through the evening, and we'll have temperatures mostly in the upper 40s to low 50s. Tonight, we drop back into the 30s and 40s, and we stay above average right through Wednesday. It looks like, oh, we have to take those off here. Thanksgiving surely passed, but temperatures will be much colder as we go into the end of the week. That's when we'll have highs into the 30s by then. Bianca, over to you.
All right, Audrey, thanks so much. More news straight ahead, including some very big baseball news straight ahead. Well, it's news shaking the sports world. Star outfielder Juan Soto staying in New York, but is moving from the Bronx to Queens after agreeing to a massive multi-year contract with the New York Mets. Fox 5's Tina Cervasio is here now to break down the big contract. Tina, this broke last night when we were here, and everyone was just like, what? How much?
We were. I mean, Bianca, it broke at exactly 10:10 p.m. last night. We were live here on the 10 o'clock news, and this was just an absolute seismic change in the baseball world as that word came out that Juan Soto agreed to join the New York Mets to sign a 15-year, $765 million deal. And this, not just the largest deal in baseball history, but the largest deal in sports history. And not only did the Mets get the biggest free agent, but they took him away from the New York Yankees, where he played last season, of course. The Yankees were in on this Soto sweepstakes, offering Soto a 16-year, $760 million deal. The 26-year-old hit 41 home runs and finished third in AL MVP voting in his only season with the Yankees. But there's more. The deal from the Mets comes with some interesting terms, and this maybe is what made the difference. The contract has a $75 million signing bonus. Soto can opt out after the 2029 season when he is 31 years old. But the Mets can void the opt-out by adding $5 million on the remaining 10 years of the contract after 2029, which would bring the total contract to $805 million. The four-time All-Star outfielder joins a Mets lineup that features NL MVP runner-up Francisco Lindor and rising superstar Mark Vientos, along with the young slugging catcher Francisco Alvarez. The Mets last year did fall 2 wins short of a World Series appearance during their magical run. But after news of the Soto signing, the Mets' odds to win the World Series went from plus 1,200 to plus 700, right behind the defending champion Dodgers for second best odds. The Amazons also made that magical run with another four-time All-Star first baseman Pete Alonso, who is also a free agent. That is next up for the Mets to decide if they want to bring back the 30-year-old first baseman, who after a down year during the regular season came up clutch during the playoffs. The homegrown Met is currently second on the franchise's all-time home run list, just 26 home runs behind Darryl Strawberry. The Yankees, well, they now have work to do after losing the team's best slugger next to Aaron Judge. Even before losing Soto, the team had holes to fill in the infield and the bullpen, and now they can add outfield to that list. So for the defending American League champs, their offseason got a little tougher. So we'll see what the Bombers will pivot to next. This is just the start of the offseason.